when I was a junior in high school, there was an announcement they were going to form a debate team, and I lived on a farm, so I couldn't meet after school. And I said, well, I'm going to go home. Two of my buddies said, no, we'll take you home afterwards. Why don't you go to the meeting? So I went to the meeting, and that was the start of my career in debate.
And where was this? Where did you go to high school?
A little farm community in western Iowa, Harlan, Iowa. Well, I'd always been interested in reading, in ideas, I guess I would say, and debate seemed to be a way of pursuing some of those interests. And it was an outlet. I was not in sports, was not in band, because again, they practiced outside school hours, whereas the debate team was given an hour during school time to do its work. So it was an option for a farm kid riding a school bus.
And how successful were you?
Well, moderately, I think. I did pretty well. I was an alternate for a debate scholarship at the Brindley Tournament at Northern Iowa, where I ended up going to my undergraduate years. We didn't do many large tournaments. Mostly it was home and home between nearby towns and areas. I did do an oratory contest and one in the region, so I went to the state oratory contest, American Legion oratorical contest, I guess it was. But, you know, I was not terribly good, but good enough for the area in which I was. Well, I came here in 1970 from the University, excuse me, from the University of Michigan. Did not become involved in the debate program. Immediately after coming here in 1 year, I was made director of graduate study. But I did work somewhat with the debate program. Kurt Ritter was here in debate, and Kurt was very interested in innovative ideas. So we did jury trial kinds of things with the debaters. We did a lot of student congress work with people over at DePaul University, and I was sponsor for a while the DSR TKA chapter. But after Kurt left, we tried to keep the program going, and it really didn't manage to stay alive. Economic, basically. Many of our debaters were not from the departmental roster. They were not majors in the department. They were often pre-law or something like that. The university was not willing to provide funds beyond the departmental budget, and as you know, debate travel became more and more expensive. And it finally got to the point where the department made a decision we could invest our resources in other ways that would be more beneficial to the department than the debate program. Mm-hmm. And so it was dropped. There was an abortive effort to try to get some funds raised from past debaters, but that was not successful. Well, I think it's unfortunate because I don't know of a better training in argumentation, logical reasoning, critical thinking, rapid response, learning to do intensive and deep research in a topic and to really master that topic, and then to be able to present your ideas in a variety of settings with facing a variety of different plans and programs and ideas. So you really have to be very flexible and able to take what you bring to match what they're bringing and then work out through that some kind of response system. Well, I think for some of the reasons I just pointed to, when I did my research for my master's thesis, it was just no problem at all to do the research. I mean, I knew how to do research. I knew how to go to the library. I knew how to dig out things. I knew how to outline. I knew how to organize. I could take a massive amount of material, find a system of cataloging it, making access to it. Before I wrote the master's thesis, I essentially had it all in a box. And all I had to do was start chapter 1 and go through the box. So I think it's that. I think it's also you're to some degree interacting with the professors in your department in ways that most students don't get the opportunity. I mean, many times when we were on the road, Lil Wagner and I, Lil Wagner's the debate coach, Lil Wagner and I would talk at some length about philosophical problems, issues. She would probe, she would disagree. I mean, it was really an experience of being, working with people much more knowledgeable than I was at a level of age and maturity and understanding I didn't have that helped me to get to a level of maturity and understanding. And I just think the ability to think on your feet and to process material rapidly is an important idea. You've got to be able to understand what they're saying if you're going to disagree and refute. You've got to be able to figure out what is the counter-argument for that, or what is the thing that their argument doesn't have a sound basis, yet they're making it. And so you can destroy the argument saying, well, what's the backing and the reasoning behind that? And you can point out it isn't there. Well, I'd have to say almost any profession in one sense, because the ability to communicate, the ability to organize material, the ability to think on your feet, the ability to process information coming from others, those are crucial in almost any kind of professional role you're going to have, whether you're a professor in a classroom, whether you're a lawyer. Obviously, it's tremendously good training for lawyers, but it's also very good for, I think, business individuals, executives. Scientists certainly need to have many of the clear thinking skills. And it's interesting to me that so many times people who are good at communicating and can communicate orally and in print and write well end up rescuing, if you will, papers that other people are proposing. That you end up with your name on an article, or you end up advising people how to do something that in a sense seems second nature, but it's something they've not learned to do. Well, many of them turn to law. I haven't coached since my days at Michigan. Steve Thal, one of my persons there, does a lot of international law, teaches in Tübingen, sometimes in Germany, has an international clientele. Chuck Adamick was Los Angeles head of Winston and I think it was Winston and Strawn. Anyway, one of the Chicago law firms had a branch out on the West Coast. Others ended up in a wide variety of professions, some teaching, obviously, but others going into graduate school, mostly in our field, but not necessarily. I guess it's the fact that it unlocked so many doors. I mean, it got me into the American Forensic Association, and I was editor of their journal for a time. It propelled me into a really sense of professional participation in the profession through Central State Speech Association, through the Michigan Intercollegiate Speech League, which we had when I was at Michigan, through the Speech Communication Association. All of those really flowed out of. And the first things I did in those areas typically linked to something in what I was doing in forensics, or making a paper, or writing a summary of research and debate, or doing something that would then be presented at the convention, end up in an article. First article I ever did was in graduate school, where Jerry Polisky and I did an article on application of symposium forum to contest group discussion, which grew out of our experience at a Big Ten gathering where that was the focus. And so in that day and age, I'm talking now the late 50s, graduate students didn't publish. And Jerry and I were the only ones, graduate students at Wisconsin, who published an article, short as it was, in a national journal. So it was the start of a whole series of things that opened up doors here, and there. My master's thesis was a history of forensics at Iowa State Teachers College, which was interesting in the sense that it talked about the degree to which debate was integral to so much of the development of the curriculum in the department. Wonderful anecdotes about the literary societies and their approaches. Wonderful editorial which said that it was terrible, people weren't coming to football games, but they had a solution to that. The solution was to schedule the football games in the afternoon before the debates were held in the evening against other schools, because then there would be an audience turning out for this. And to read about some of the responses to the debates, which were hotly contested with other schools from nearby institutions, was really kind of fascinating. And of course, that was somewhat pre-World War I, somewhat after World War I. Well, Kansas has always had a strong debate program. I think in recent years, Don Parson had a lot of commitment there. Certainly Northwestern over the years has been a landmark. The rest of the Big Ten, I think, have gradually moved away from, I don't think of them really as being prominent in the scene anymore, whereas a lot of smaller institutions, including my old alma mater, University of Northern Iowa, still have a pretty aggressive debate program and forensic program, and they participate in a number of contests, win. So it's become a different level of competition. It's also, I think, become a little narrower. When I was directing forensics or involved in forensics, both at Colorado, where I was for a year, at Northern Iowa, and then at Michigan, we did a lot of things like taking our debate groups out to Rotary and Kiwanis. We focused very much on communication. It's now becoming much more specialized genre. And so, remember, many years ago, Bob Friedman wrote an article saying, "I'm no longer a competent debate coach." And it is true, because the emphasis on communication has been lost, I think, to too much of a degree. So it's become a highly specialized, intensive a process where you have to really move with the debaters through the system of the year and the topic if you're going to be a competent debate judge. I think it's a loss. I like the fact that there is more variety than there has been in debate styles. I mean, I was sort of at the time when we began to bring in the cross-examination debate sort of thing, but versus the standard debate format. But now there's a lot more variety in things that people can do in various streams. So I think that's probably a good thing. That people can pick the program that fits their mission and goals. Intelligence, a decent IQ certainly, you know. I think they need the ability to listen very critically and very perceptively, and to hear what's being said without a pre-bias as to what is going to be said. You really have to think about what is the reality of what I'm hearing. I think that's an important critical listening skill that a lot of people really don't have. We tend to get biased with prejudice, or I know that argument. You don't know where that argument's going necessarily, so if you don't follow it, you can really slip. Research skills, obviously very important. I think the ability to reason critically and to organize vast amounts of material is absolutely essential. And I think those are learned skills. I think you learn them by participating in the debate process. And good coaches teach you how to do those things. Well, I think it's a societal problem. You see that so dominantly, I think, in the dysfunctionality of the U.S. Senate. You see it in a lot of party politics. You see it in the models that are being presented in talk shows where you scream at each other, where the extreme positions become dominant. So rather than having a kind of bell-shaped curve, if you will, where people are what we're seeing is effectively an evacuation in the middle, and you get a very partisan group over here, you get a very partisan group over here, and I think a lot of people then have become very turned off to participation in the civic life of our communities. And I think some of that same thing has happened. I think that's one of the societal problems that we face. And I don't think debaters or the debate programs ever caused that, but I think it is a product of a variety of forces in our society. So I really leaped from the debate forum into a broader civic analysis of that, but I think it applies.
Right.
Well, I would hope that we would return to a greater emphasis on critical thinking, logical reasoning, written and oral communication skills in higher education, but also in high school. I think that some of what we used to do at the college level has moved down to being done at the high school level. And many of the debate programs at the high school level are producing debaters that were probably at a level I was not till I was a junior sophomore in college. Now, some of them burn out because of the intensive pressure. There are things I would like to see done differently in some cases. But I think that there is some value there. I do think that higher ed needs to rethink the emphasis it puts on, well, it's perhaps not higher ed, that may be unfair. I think society needs to rethink the emphasis it puts on what's the immediate job application of this thing, and go back much more to the value of learning how to reason, how to evaluate material critically, how to research, how to do the things that give you a base for a very, very considered opinion that you're prepared to advance and support. One of the things that most disappointed me in my last years of teaching was the degree to which students could provide massive amounts of information, but they couldn't frame an argument. They couldn't quite tell you, what does this mean? What do I conclude from this? What ought I to do given this? I taught persuasion and ethics, was kind of my core at the last years. And one of the papers I assigned to students was to develop a code of ethics for themselves. And they would do that shortly after midterm. I would critique the paper extensively and hand it back, and then ask them to revise it. And it was amazing how many students didn't know what to do when they were pushed to say, how do you defend this? Or what's the ground on which you can take this position? They were just at sea in even being asked the question. And that really frustrated me. The best students in the class were as good as they've ever been. But I would say the average of the class was much less skilled in those requirements, and of critical thinking, of writing skills, of analysis of complex material, of being open to considering alternative ways of getting to the same point. Mm-hmm. You and I can disagree on certain basic assumptions and yet come together and say, this is a value that is central to what we do and we need to do it. And I think debate helped me to understand something about how you can converge on something, but start actually from different bases to get there. There was a time when we were teaching future teachers of English and composition that it didn't matter what they wrote, just so long as they wrote. And so it became a matter of get them to express themselves however badly they do it. Don't worry about some of the niceties. And I'm not talking about, the question of necessarily spelling its versus its or grammatical correctness, but really asking them to be able to reason through, to follow a thread of logic. And I think in that emphasis on we've got to make you feel good, we've got to get you to write, get you to do these things. I think there was a degree to which some of the more esoteric things became viewed as somewhat negative or prissy, perhaps. Mm. So there's a whole pattern of moving away from this. So when they got to college, often they would not take the freshman English course, or the freshman English course for a while here was anything the professor wanted to do with it. If you wanted to have them come to your home and you wanted to do cooking for the term, you did cooking. Now that's a little exaggeration. But basically, we lost the moorings of what we ought to be doing in a liberal arts education, it seems to me. And we're coming back to that much more than I think we used to, but it's hard ground to make up. The other thing is we've democratized higher education a lot more. We're letting in people we didn't used to let in. And that's good. But we have to be sure that we take them where they are and move them to where they need to be. And I'm not sure we're always able to be very successful at that. We need to get a better understanding of the worth of the ability to do good logical reasoning, do critical thinking, be able to take the diverse stuff that's thrown at you. Take an editorial, or take 3 editorials. What of this is valid? What's not? How do you reason your way through to a conclusion about what you ought to believe or not believe out of this?
It's consumer education, if you will. We need a lot more consumer education about the stuff that's thrown at us in the media and from other individuals. If you don't respect your opponent, you're not going to give that opponent the benefit of the kind of analysis and careful reasoning and demonstration of why you disagree with their point. You will be more tended to say, that's stupid, and I'm not going to do that. I think that obviously being willing to vouch for the evidence itself, for the authenticity of what you offer. It's not enough to say, well, I read this somewhere, or I read this in the book. You've got to really be able to say, does it correlate with what else you found out? Does this make sense? Does it fit the pattern, or is it aberrant? You've got to have a respect for the quality of the evidence, the sound reasoning of that evidence, the critical backing for it. You can't just say, well, Sarah Palin said this, or Barack Obama said this, or anybody else said this. Does it make sense? And if you can't begin to make those kinds of tests, you're in serious trouble. Yeah, and you know, the whole notion of ethical responsibility, of just honesty and truthfulness. I mean, those are such simple words, but they're absolutely crucial. I think that we need to get away from this incredible emphasis on testing and getting back to making informed judgments of what students do. There's far too much emphasis now on teaching to the test. And the demonstrations are very clear that if you make my salary as a teacher, or you make the institution, the school's future, hang on how students perform in a test, you're going to increase the cheating, you're going to increase the deceptiveness, you're going to increase the teaching of the test. What happens is many other things that are important in the development of the students disappear in the emphasis, and we've got to get the scores up on this particular subject. So I think that's one thing we need to look at. I think we need to improve the quality of teaching. I think we need to reward good teaching. I think we need to look at the whole system of tenure. People are granted tenure so often in the public school system after 2 or 3 years with no critical analysis of their performance. We simply can't do that. We make mistakes after 6 or 7 years in higher ed sometimes in tenuring somebody. How can you know after 2 or 3 years without, we don't have master teachers working with them. We just need to do a lot better job of having principals into the classroom, helping to mentor and move forward the quality of the teaching, and of offering remediation when it's not working the way it should be. We have argued for years in Illinois about strengthening the quality of high school requirements. Many of our school districts are so small they can't afford foreign languages. They don't teach advanced math. We've been incapable of combining those districts, of consolidating, of doing the things structurally and politically. I don't want my high school over there, I've got to be high school. So there are a lot of things we should be doing there. I also think we really need to work even before they show up at the classroom door in kindergarten. We need to try to remediate some of the problems that are caused by class, by economic welfare, by the problems that so many of our families face. And the school can't remediate all those things. You can't overcome some of those obstacles. With intensive work, yes, you can make a difference. And sometimes, there are miracles. But you can't expect a miracle for every child. I think DSR, Delta Sigma Rho, Tau Kappa Alpha, Pi Kappa, all of these have been very good in that they have motivated people to meet the requirements for membership. I think they have been instrumental in recognizing quality programs. DSR, TKA, has developed some innovative kinds of things. Student Congress that Bob Weiss and I worked on for years attracted a lot of students and I think did some good things. I think that to the degree that they give service awards and recognition awards to outstanding coaches or people, DSR used to honor Speaker of the Year. I can remember, if you'll pardon the aside, one member objecting that we wanted to give Martin Luther King an award as Speaker of the Year because after all he dared school teachers to do things, or school children to do things that were not appropriate. You know, we've made progress, I think that argument was not a bad argument to have had. That, you know, face up to the fact that there was a university professor who took what I would regard as a racist stance on that particular issue, and we couldn't overcome it at the time. So I think there are things that the can do. Remember the golden anniversary of DSR, where they honored Hubert Humphrey and several of the very important people. And I think, again, it helps the society to recognize the importance of some of these experiences that otherwise might not be noted. I don't know what would have happened to me if I had not had debate. I might not have gone to college. I think I would not have gone on into higher ed as I did. That really was a transition point for me when I was working on my master's and was assistant debate coach. That I can work with these people. And then I got a job at the University of Colorado as an instructor rather than going into a high school English speech, which is what I prepared myself to do. So if it had not been for those series of chances, if you will, that arose out of my experiences, I would have had a totally different career. And I think many of the people that you're pointing to really understand the centrality of that experience in leading them to the choices that they made that gave them the careers that they've had. My father opposed my going to college, and it caused a rift that participated. I did not see him for 13 years after I made the decision that I was going to go to college. I put myself through, working my way through in 3 years, graduated with master's in 4 without any debt, and eventually we reconciled, and my dad was proud of what I did, but he was an immigrant and never had formal education, came over from Denmark. He did not have the framework in which to understand why I didn't want to do what he did, which was to farm. And he thought that it was a mistake to do what I did. So, I had a student when I taught a semester, 2 quarters at Chicago Circle, and I had a student who came in and said, I don't have my paper done. I said, well, why not? She said, my father burned my books. And I said, you're kidding me. And she said, no. He said I was getting uppity. And I said, nobody else in your family's gone to college, have they? No. And I said, I want to tell you my story. So I told it to her, and I said, you are not alone. You are not alone in facing the fact that your family is not supportive of higher education, that they will, in some ways, more dramatically oppose it than my father did. He never burned my books. But I think I was able to talk with her in a way that reassured her, and she got a decent, I don't remember if she got a B or an A, but she got a very good grade in my class, and I think in one sense my experience resonated with her experience enough that it was able to help her move through.
Wow. What a story.
It's an interesting, you don't know. I mean, I don't know what happened to her. I was only there for 2 quarters. I went back to the University of Michigan. We didn't have any reason to maintain contact, so I don't know. But my feeling is she probably got a degree and has had a good life. I'd like to believe that. I think I'm proudest of having been of service as a teacher, as an administrator. My job, I always thought of administration as enabling people to do what they wanted to accomplish or what they want to do. Not to put up roadblocks, but to facilitate, to create the environment in which it's possible for them to achieve whatever that goal was. I think I felt the same way about my role with professional associations. I didn't go into presidency of the NCA saying, this is my platform. I went in saying, what can I do to help the association grow and prosper as an association? And, I hit on a theme for my convention in Louisville on ethics and values in communication. And that stimulated a number of publications and papers where years before that there had been almost nothing on ethics and communication. We followed it for some years. There were a number of papers. We created the Ethics Commission, which is now a section, communication ethics section. We've had semi-annual, biannual, every other year meetings. Brought a lot of focus. Books have been written. I mean, I didn't do that, but I created a situation, an environment, a milieu in which that could happen. And other people then were empowered to move through. And I think that's what, so, you know, of the articles I've written, I'm not sure very many of them will have much permanency. But the Communication Ethics Commission, whatever happens, and then section, whatever happens to it, has changed a lot of life. Courses are in the curriculum that would not have been. I didn't put them there. Other people put them there. But, you know, it's something like that that I think you really look for as an achievement. So I guess I would say it's being of service to the community, to my profession, and to my colleagues and to my university. That's what I'm proudest of. It's obviously the central act of being human. If you don't communicate, the thing you and I regard as central to our humanity is gone. We are symbol-using creatures. And think of what Obama does with a speech at a convention. Think of the harm that can be done with you know, fire in a crowded theater or kill the so-and-so. You know, it's so central. And again, go back to the point I made earlier, how often people have to turn to those who have skills in communication to be able to get their paper written, to be able to get the proposal advanced, to make the arguments that enable people to say, this is what we will do rather than that. It's just too central. And because of that, I think it gets downplayed sometimes. Just like, you know, walking. Walking, what's to walking? Then if you develop like arthritis like I've got, or a little stenosis of the spine, walking is not just walking. It is an effort that you have to put a lot of work into. I mean, that's not a very good example or metaphor, but I think you get the idea that we take for granted that which is most common. And communication is about as common as you can get. I think one of the things we ought to think about sometimes is the breadth of the forensic programs that I remember from the 60s and 50s, where you weren't just doing debate or you weren't just doing contest elements, but you took kids who were doing debate out to make a presentation of the Rotary, not in the form of a debate, but to, you know, to have that public speaking experience before an audience that is going to be critical in some sense, you know, and to have that opportunity, I think, was the important thing. And of my debaters, many of them would say that was kind of unique, and they enjoyed it. I mean, you know, it's nice to have an audience listen to you when you're 19, 20, 21 years of age, and here you got the Rotary and the Kiwanis people saying, hey, nice job, and applauding you and talking to you as an equal, or in some cases, tell me more about. So I think that it's that matter of we want to translate the debate experience, which is often in a kind of hermetically sealed mason jar approach of a contest, into the larger frame where they are using those skills, but translating them into many varieties of real-world experiences, which ultimately they will do later in life. But I think it's a good thing to have that happen during the experience itself, if it can be done. And I think that the work in group discussion, I did some extemp speaking, did a little oratory, all those things were part of a package in a sense that seems so natural and so automatic. And I think too narrow a focus isn't as rich an education as you might get. Well, I think debate coaches inevitably mentor. Whether you're driving a car back from a tournament in 3 hours, discussing what happened, but then you move to other things. You know, it's not like when you're a freshman, you know, you lie we were 5 of us in the room. You lie awake and you talk about these philosophical issues. But there's something about being able to really begin to dig into some of those things with somebody who's lived a little longer, have a different perspective, and to begin to engage in a discussion that isn't just sort of a passing by play, but you're really beginning to say, well, how do you reason your way through this? Or what is this problem? Or what do we do about X? I think that's just invaluable. You're mentoring 3, 4, 5, however many students. That mentoring opportunity is what a debate coach has, and an ordinary classroom teacher finds it very difficult to create the conditions. I used to tell students, you really need to come to me because I can't come to all of you, but I'm here. Very few of them will ever take advantage of that for all kinds of reasons, which have various labels. But the students that did, I remember one student came in and said, could I do a special study with you in which I essentially track your work for a semester? So I put him to work. We worked on a speech together. We did some paper I was doing. And, he left having some sense of what the academic life was like in a way the ordinary student could not have had. So to the degree we can offer those opportunities, and I think about undergraduates working in laboratories in the sciences, there's some tremendous opportunities for mentoring. Maybe a little exploitation occurs too, but we really need to find as many ways as we can to be the mentor to the students. Just as we need mentors for some things, so they need to be mentored as well. And it's very difficult sometimes to find opportunities to do that with your ordinary student.